And the reason why Rameshji was invited was, I was enamored by his effort to write the 1,000 names of Sri Hari or Sri Vishnu, which he had taken up long back. So I think we have covered around 445 names in the blog. So I'm a daily reader of that blog, and I'll post the link of that blog in the Jyotish group as well as in the YouTube channel there. I've made you the co-host, Rameshji. So if you want to share something, a presentation or something like that, you can of course do it.
No, I don't have any presentation.
Okay, in that case, it is fine, sir. In that case, it is.
I'm assuming it's going to be a conversation. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I have a few questions, but I'll just invite Rameshji to speak a few initial words before we can actually get to the questions.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Devarshi. I think it's an absolute pleasure to be able to speak on this subject. Like you mentioned, about say about a year ago or a little over a year ago is when I started to write on the Vishnu Sahasranama. One of the things that we have to be very clear about is that there are several commentaries on the Vishnu Sahasranama. It's not something that somebody is doing newly. There's really very little need for any more writing or elaborating on the names as such. Therefore, for example, you have Shankara Bhashya, which is the most popular, which is Adi Shankara's commentary on the Vishnu Sahasranama. Then you have Parashara Bhattar, who approaches it in the Vishishta Advaita angle. And Parashara Bhattar was a direct disciple of Ramanuja. And in fact, Ramanuja considered him his own son in one sense. And therefore, you have the Parashara Bhattar commentary on the Vishnu Sahasranama. And you also have several other commentators, modern as well as, from many years ago. For example, Swami Chinmayananda has written a commentary on it. Then Radhakrishna Shastri has written an extensive commentary on it. Then, so there are several commentaries that base their fundamental interpretations from the works of the commentaries of Shankara and Parashara Bhattar primarily. There is also the Dvaita commentary by Madhva. So there are several commentaries. So in that sense, I did not want to write a commentary. I was very clear about that. The second aspect is therefore, the approach that I've taken is to take one nama, sit down with it and reflect on it in terms of what it would mean to me and to others. So that's the approach that I've taken. So which means I started to write a reflective commentary, for lack of a better word, on each of these namas every day. So we are about 450 days into this process. So there have been occasions when I have not been able to write on a daily basis, but overall, it's been about almost on a daily basis, if not on a daily basis. So that's the whole idea. So this is a reflective commentary where, so you could call it the meditations on the Vishnu Sahasranama. That is the fundamental premise on which I started, and that is the premise on which it goes. So it wouldn't, typically what would happen is that I would give the commentary as Shankara has interpreted it, and as Parashara Bhattar interprets it right at the beginning. And then I would go forth to, so typically these translations would be about a line or two lines, because the assumptions then, I think, and I'm assuming this, is that people had a very deep understanding of the of Sanatana Dharma itself, of Dharma itself, and therefore they did not really need to have elaborate explanations for each of these namas. So if somebody said Vishnu, who is essentially means he who pervades and invades within, who's within and without, people understood what it meant. But we don't live in that kind of the present is very different from the past, and therefore I believe that each of these namas is a window into the landscape of Sanatana Dharma. So you open a window, peep through it, and then you see the landscape as it appears to you through that window, and then you can start to make connections from that. I also believe that the Dharma itself is laid out in such a plan. It's not for you to approach it from, you can't say that I'll read all of this and then come to it. It doesn't happen like that. You take one string, and then using that string, you start reaching out to the multiple nodes that it connects to. That is Indra's net, in fact. That's the whole philosophy of the dharma itself. So if you look up, you take up one nama, then you know that there is a reference to it in the Bhagavad Gita, for example. Then look up that reference and meditate on it. Then you also realize that there are multiple interpretations that would be you would find multiple meanings in the Upanishads, for example, or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, for example, and then you read it. So what happens is that as you go through those 1,000 namas, you start to explore and start looking at the whole of Sanatana Dharma starts to reveal itself and in sense unpack itself for you. And I believe that is the approach that everybody needs to take. And it's not an advice, but it's just that I believe after about 445 days of meditations, I believe that is an approach that works well. So you sit. It's impossible for us to try to embrace the whole of it, but rather take one little node and then start from there. Yeah, so that's the approach that I've taken. Yeah.
Right, sir. So just one quick question here, if you would want, if you would permit me. So it's a common conception, or it's a common perception that the Vishnu Sahasranama was actually recited by Vedavyasa, not Vedavyasa, sorry, by Bhishma Pitama when he was on the bed of arrows. So how correct is that perception? Because that is something we are approaching a very contentious zone with that, because some people say that it was not, say Bhishma Pitama who was the author, but it was Vedavyasa. The authorship should be credited to Vedavyasa. So what is your opinion on that, sir?
Okay, so I think I've written on this. Here is what it is. The Vishnu Sahasranama appears, this particular Vishnu Sahasranama appears in the Anushasana Parva of the Mahabharata. Right. So, and like you said, see, Vedavyasa is the one who compiled all of these things, the Vedas and other things. So if you say that he authored it, I mean, you can say he compiled all of these things. So, but what the Mahabharata essentially says is this, and I have a slightly different interpretation. I'll unpack it very slowly now so that people get it. Is that, as I see it, the Mahabharata itself is to be approached from two angles. One, as this great, as the Panchama Veda, it's the fifth of the Vedas, because it's a huge ocean that connects to multiple points, has multiple stories within it. Is therefore it's in terms of the knowledge that it embodies, it's huge. It's a Veda by itself. Using the term Veda in terms of knowledge per se. That is the first part of it. Second is, like I said, this Vishnu Sahasranama appears in the Anushasana Parva. Now, why does it appear there? For example, what happens is that people think, my contention is it was neither Bhishma nor was it Vedavyasa. It was actually Krishna who was speaking. Because in that Kshetra, which is called the Kurukshetra, where all the Dharma warriors of the age came together to work out their karma. That was it. Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre. That is what it is said, right? So all of these warriors came there to work out their karma. They could have belonged to the Kauravas. They could have belonged to the armies of the Pandavas, but they came out to came to work out their karma. In the entire Kshetra, there was one Kshetrajna. A Kshetrajna is a person who knows the Kshetra. He is the only person who knows the Kshetra, and that was only Krishna. He was the only one who knew the secret of that Kshetra, which is the Dharma Kshetra. Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra. That's why Dhritarashtra in the Bhagavad Gita starts like this. He says, Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, Kim Kurvat. He asks Sanjaya, right? I mean, so he is the only Kshetrajna. He is the only one who knows, and the Kshetra can be looked at in multiple ways. For example, if you look at it as sacred geography, it is a place, it is a geographic location. So you could think of it as Kurukshetra. But Kshetra also can refer to the human body, and embodied within that human body is the Atman, which is an Amsha of that Paramatman. The Jivatman is the Amsha of the Paramatman. That is how we see it. And therefore, the only person who knew the secret of that Jivatman there in that Kshetra was the Kshetrajna, who was Krishna. And therefore, there are multiple places. There is a Shiva Sahasranama also that appears in the Mahabharata. Krishna doesn't allow anybody else to say it. he talks of the Shiva Sahasranama himself. It's not like he asks others to say it. And at the time of the Vishnu Sahasranama, Arjuna is speaking to Krishna. When Krishna says, Krishna seems very distracted. And when Arjuna asks, he says, my mind has traveled far away. It is now with Bhishma. I and Bhishma are one, he says, which means the Kshetrajna, who is Krishna, and the Kshetra as embodied in Bhishma have connected, which means Bhishma has understood his own true nature. That is, that the Jivatma that dwells within him is an Amsha of the Paramatma. And therefore, when Krishna says that I and Bhishma are one, essentially, what Bhishma utters has to essentially be what Krishna is only Krishna's words. So Bhishma there is just a nimitta, just an instrument of delivery and nothing more. It is Krishna himself who speaks. Interestingly, you will also note that in the entire Bhagavad Gita, nowhere will it be mentioned nowhere will you find the name Krishna. It will always be Bhagavan Vacha. Because for the entire duration of the Bhagavad Gita, he was Bhagavan himself. He was not Krishna, the embodied avatara. He had become Bhagavan. That is why he could, speak of the Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, even during this time, when he and Bhishma were intimately connected, when the journey of the lone to the alone was made, when the Jivatman has merged with the Paramatman, that is when the transmission of the Vishnu Sahasranama happened. And therefore, when Bhishma speaks, it is actually a Krishna who's speaking. And at a very symbolic level too, Bhishma is symbolic of the superego. You look at how Bhishma's life plays out. And if you would do an allegorical assessment of Bhishma's character across the Mahabharata, you will see that at every stage, he allows his ego to get the better of him. Be it the unnecessary pratignya that he gives to Satyavati because he wants to make his father happy. His dharma, and he is the master of dharma, right? He is the greatest. He talks of the Shanti Parva. He lays out dharma as he understood it. But what he has done there is instead, he gives this pratignya where he says, where he gives up his kingdom when dharma demanded that it was he who should have ruled the kingdom. And therefore, and then again, the abduction of Amba, Ambika, Ambalika, and then the refusal to marry this one, and all of those things are essentially his ego. Even during the battle, you will see that he was called the Shvetavira. That is the person who was dressed all in white. And Vedavyasa says, in the hustle and bustle of battle, Bhishma stood out because he was dressed all in white. Even his armor was white, his weapons were white. So it was that ego that always needed to stand out. And in a very allegorical, symbolic sense, Bhishma is the chattering ego in Arjuna's head as well. And therefore, in order for Arjuna to cross over, to make the connect, to understand the Kshetrajna, he had to destroy and kill Bhishma. And look at the number of arrows he had to shoot to kill his own ego. That is the symbolic significance of what Bhishma is. And even after he drops, till the last drop of blood is exhausted, and he stands completely drained of the last drop of his ego. That is when he is able to transmit the Vishnu Sahasranama. So in that sense, that is my that is how I see it. That it was, although Bhishma was just the nimitta, the instrument that spoke the words of Bhagavan Krishna.
Right. So if anyone wants to go through that writing, sir has posted that on his Facebook page. I don't know if it is there on the blog as well, but anyone can follow sir on Facebook and get to that writing which sir just mentioned regarding Bhishma being being representative of the superego in a sense. Okay, sir. So coming to the next question that I have, the Vishnu Sahasranama, it starts with the shloka Shuklambaram Dharam Vishnum. So the point is, before starting any ritual, the Lord of the Lord Vigneshwaram, who is also Ganapati, he is actually invoked here. He is actually invoked before starting any ritual or any puja. For a layman Hindu who knows that Vigneshwara is the remover of obstacles, So before starting any shloka or any puja, we always take the name of Ganapati, basically. But then this sloka is actually being, in my opinion, this sloka is actually being used as a Ganapati Dhyanam when it is recited at the beginning of the Vishnu Sahasranama. But it is also in my, as I say it, it can also be, it can also fit in as a Dhyana shloka for Sri Vishnu also, right? So is this an invocation of Lord Ganesha, or is it just to tell us that Ganesha is actually an embodiment of Hari Vishnu, or what is your interpretation of this, sir?
Yeah, forget my interpretation. The Kanchi Paramacharya himself, has given a fairly elaborate interpretation on this particular shloka. Shuklam Baradaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantiye. Can you point to me where it says that it's Ganesha? It's Shuklam Baradaram Vishnum Shashivarnam, who's the color of the moon. He's wearing, he's dressed in the Pitambara Vastra, and he's of the color of the moon. Shuklam Bharadhanam Vishnum Sashivarnam Chaturbhujam, 4 hands, Prasanna Vadanam, that he has a absolutely pleasant face. Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye, that if I meditate upon him, he will help me overcome all the obstacles that are in my way, the vignas, that Vignaharta, Vignakarta. While it's clear that, that Ganesha is symbolic of the remover of obstacles, primarily because if you look at the Ganapati Atharva Shirsha, one of the things that they say about Ganesha is that he says he's Mooladhara Stitosi Nityam, that he is located at the Mooladhara, which is the Mooladhara Chakra. I mean, if you look at it, which corresponds to the region of the gut, the region of the, and where you have the the sexual organs as well as the digestive organs. Essentially, again, if you look at it symbolically, what it essentially means is that unless you get over your primal instincts of sex, fear, favor, and then control over your taste, sense of taste, and all of that, you will not be able to make you will not be able to cross over that particular junction, the Mooladhara. You have to get, but it's also the fundamental basis of your own existence, right? I mean, it's a Mooladhara. Without food, without the primal instincts, you as a human being can't even exist. That is your Moola Adhara. That's your primal, fundamental foundation. But in the journey of the spiritual journey, you need to cross over that. Therefore, that is what Ganapati can do for you. So I'm answering the Ganapati question also, why we worship Ganapati, because he is Mooladhara Sthitosi Nityam, and it is in order, and he removes the obstacles in the journey of the Atman, because he gives you, it is he who is able to, because you have to get control over your gluttony, your desire to eat and all of those things, and also your desires, which are kama, krodha, and all of those things. So that is essentially the function. But this particular shloka, which is actually, as the Kanchi Paramacharya himself says, it's primarily addressed to Vishnu himself, and Vishnu is not different from Ganesha. In the Puranic, this one, you will find that he's the uncle, in the sense that, because he gives Parvati in marriage to Maheshwara, and therefore in that sense he is the what in southern India we would call the mama, the brother of Parvati, and therefore Ganesha. Right. So in that sense, yeah.
All right, sir. And the other thing what I've noted there is that, as we proceed in the Sahasranama, the color of Vishnu, it is mentioned interchangeably as both white and blue. Okay, so of course this shloka refers to Vishnu's color as white, but in what sense these colors
have... it does not say Vishnu's color. Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnu Shashivarnam. Yeah, I mean, he's the color of the moon. Essentially, the moon is very symbolic across the board, because moon is symbolic of the mind, manas. If you look at the Purush Sukta, it says Chandrama Manaso Jataha, right? In the Purush Sukta, it says out of Chandra emerged the mind, manas. because if you look at how the moon is, it waxes and wanes, once in 14 days, once it waxes, then it wanes. The mind is also like that. It is constantly changing. It's never able to concentrate on one thing. That is why the mind is always, compared to the moon. That's why the Purusha Sukta says, Chandrama Manaso Jata, that the mind is symbolic. Out of Chandra emerged the moon, and out of Chandra emerged the mind. So Manas. So in that sense, it could also mean that, and the great control of the Manas is Vishnu. I mean, that's because he sits in the. If you look at the multiple names in the Vishnu Sahasranama, they'll say that he sits in the Hridaya Guha and all that, the heart cave and all of those things. And therefore that is the fundamental reason. I mean, beyond that, yeah.
Okay, sir. So coming to my next question. So it is popularly believed, or it is popularly said, that Parshuramji had cursed all the stotras to lose their significance in Kali Yuga. So this is a belief which is prevalent in this part of the country. I don't know what is there in the south, but the point is, it is said that certain slokas like Vishnu Sahasranam or Durga Saptashti, these shlokas, they are free from the curse of Parshurama. So is there a specific reason why they are free, or is it just that because the Vishnu Sahasranam is it was recited before Krishna himself? So
yeah, I think that is the primary reason, but that it's the Kshetrajna himself who, in a sense, in complete communion with Bhishma Pitamaha, and like I said, Bhishma was only the nimitta, the instrument alone, who uttered those namas, and beyond that, I mean, okay, let me also, if you have, I think there is an important angle to the Vishnu Sahasranama which needs to be understood. If you look at how the names are laid out, you will find that some names repeat themselves for whatever reasons, and but broadly, if you had to categorize all of these namas into separate classes or categories, you will find that there are broadly 7 categories into which the nama, the 1,000 names are classified. You can put them into 7 compartments or 7 boxes. Now, there are two ways in which you can approach the Supreme. You can think of the Supreme in the abstract, but it's not easy for everyone to be able to think of him in the abstract. You have the rare Ramana Maharshi who could, cross over, because over several lifetimes he had reached that stage. Or you could have Sadasiva Brahmendra, who also was that. And therefore, the second best approach is that if you instill in that deity all the Kalyana Gunas, or all of the Gunas that you think represent that Supreme Being. So that is why, so all of that. So that is the approach that the Vishnu Sahasranama takes. And it says even the 1,000 namas are not sufficient, but at least by chanting those 1,000 namas, you start to get a feel for who this Supreme Being is, who is Vishnu, who has not only created this world, but has also entered into it. They don't even say that he created, he projects this world out of himself. And who has, so he's within and without. He is someone who has enveloped everything and has also interpenetrated everything. So there is nothing that is not without him, and there is nothing that is there is nothing. There is no being. There is no living or animate or inanimate being that does not have Vishnu as part of him or her, and something that is not enveloped by him or her. Additionally, like I said, there are 7 categories. So what are these 7 categories into which you can broadly, categorize these 1,000 namas? The first category is Brahman or Parabrahman, which is a Paratattva, the essence of the Supreme. The essence of all essences, the screen on which everything is played out. Just think of it, we make a big thing about, just think of it like this. The world as you know it did not exist before you were born. So the world exists as soon as you're born, and the world blinks out or dies as soon as you die, right? I mean, your understanding of the world is essentially for during your own lifetime. You don't know anything before that, you don't know after that, because which I mean this current lifetime. I'm not saying that we always we know that you're born again and again, but in the limited space of this lifetime, that you create your world, which is also the reason, for example, that because the world that you have created is a projection of your own understanding, or your own sense of the world as you see it. That is why there are no two people who can agree on everything, because they have projected the world as they see it from within, right? So in that sense, the Brahman also at a macrocosmic level is the Paratattva, the very essence of everything, the essence of all essences. And like I said, the screen on which the entire play of life is played out. He is the Ekam, the only one, right? When you think of him as Brahman, he's Ekam, the only one, the one without a second, beyond names, forms, gunas, and all of that, and so on. So you have multiple namas that will talk of Vishnu as Brahman. So if he is Brahman, how is he? How do you relate to him? He can only be experienced as the Sat Chit Ananda, Satchidananda, that which reveals itself to itself. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? Because once that's the Advaitic concept, that once that supreme being reveals himself or herself to you, you become him, he becomes you, and therefore there is no difference. So that is the first. So there are several namas that can be classified under the category of Brahman. There is a second categorization that we can look at, which is Jagat Karaka Ishwara. That is, he who is the cause of everything. That he is the causal thing. How does he do it? From the Brahman, which is the primal state, the Paratattva, this Jagat Karaka Ishwara, as the Maya Shakti, is embedded and dissolved in the Brahman, the Paratattva itself. Animated by the Maya Shakti of that Brahman itself projects this world of forms, names, and gunas. That is why he can project, he can also draw it back himself, right? I mean, that is how it is seen. Now, what is this projection? It is the same projection that we see as the triune, the 3-in-1 Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara conception, or the 5 forms of the Pancharatra Agama of the Vaishnava tradition, which is the Paravasudeva is the supreme being, supreme form, with all of the Ananta Kalyana gunas that Vishnu has, and then the Vyuha forms of Vasudeva, which are Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, which represent the cosmic forms of consciousness, intellect, mind, and ego. And with Paravasudeva, dimensionally beyond all of these things. So essentially, it means you have to go beyond the Vyuha forms to reach that Paravasudeva. So you have to go beyond. So you go beyond consciousness, intellect, mind, and the decimation of the ego. You get to the Paravasudeva. Seen as Panchakritya. No, we are saying, we typically say that, he creates, he organizes, and he destroys. But there are 5 things actually in the dharmic system, in the Hindu dharmic system, which is Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra, or Maheshwara, if you want to call him, Ishvara, and Sadashiva, representative of the 5 functions, which are Srishti, which is, you want to call it creation, projection, whatever you want to call it. Sthiti, which is sustenance, maintenance, and organization, which is Vishnu's form. And Laya, which is Rudra, dissolution, complete. But there are 2 things that they additionally do, which is Thirodhana, that is veiling. I mean, you do not even realize that your life is so ephemeral, that you're born now, you can die at any time. I'm speaking now, I can simply disappear, I can drop off right now, I can die. But I never think of it. I think of myself as living forever. I don't think of the fact that I'm going to die. So that this veiling power, this Maya Shakti, that closes your mind to the reality of death, and closes your mind to the reality of the supreme being who lives within. So Thirodhana and Anugraha. So how does that veil go away from you? How does it go away? Only if you have Vishnu's Anugraha, or you want to call anybody, you want to call it anyone. I'm just saying Vishnu because he's my Ishta. And therefore, so when the Anugraha happens, moksha is a possibility. right? I mean, so that is the second one. So like we said, we had Brahman, which is the Paratattva, and Jagat Karakishwara. So you have multiple names that will fall under this Jagat Karakishwara. He is the creator, he has done this, he organizes this, he does this, he's benevolent, he protects, and all of those names will come. Then the third category is Jagat Niyamakara Ishwara. That is, it is not enough for him to say that he does these three things, that he has a veiling power, he creates, organizes, sustains, destroys, then he has a veiling power and he has the power to remove. But there are other things that need to happen, right? And therefore you have all of the other deities that we talk of. For example, Agni. Now, Agni is Vaishwanara. In Bhagavad Gita, he says that he is Vaishwanara, that he is Agni that digests all the food in your body. So Agni is a form of Vishnu, but you need those devatas, the Dikpalakas you need Vayu, you need Yama, and all of these are conceptualized and understood, and all of these devas are situated for the multiple functions that they have to perform. So you will have multiple names that talk of Vishnu's Jagat Niyamakaraka Ishvara function, the multifarious forms and names. So sometimes he will be called Agni, sometimes he will be called as Vayu Swarupa, sometimes he will be called all of these names as well. So that is three. We saw Brahman, we saw the Jagat Karaka Ishvara, Jagat Niyamakara Ishvara, those names. That's the third category into which the Vishnu Sahasranamas can be slotted. The fourth category is the Atma or the Atma Swarupa. That Brahman, that is the cause of the everything, at the macrocosmic level. So he has created the world and also entered into it. That is the very name of Vishnu. So Vishnu, Vishwam Vishnur Vashatkaro, Bhuta Bhavya Bhavat Prabhu. So that Vishwam that he created, he entered into that Vishwam itself. That is Vishnu. So Vishnu is he who envelops as well as invades. He pervades and invades. He is out, he is within and without. So Atma Swarupa. So he dwells within each being as the Atman, veiled by the Sharira that we think is real, our Sharira. This is the meaning of the Nama Vishnu, that he who envelops, pervades, invades everything, and so. So that is the fourth category. So you have Brahman, you have Jagat Karaka, Jagat Niyamakaraka, then the Atma Swarupa. The fifth category of namas that can be categorized are the Karma Phaladata. So you will have several names that says he is the one who decides what is your Karma Phala. So if you're going through a miserable phase in life, it's because you did something and he has decided that you need to go through this. It's only then that you will realize what needs. If there are several things that are happening, things are just in flow, in absolute flow, in rhythm, and Rita. It means that he has decided that the Karma Phala that you need to get now is this. So he's the Karma Phala Data. So you'll have multiple names that fall under that category. So he decides and determines and hands over to each the fruits of their actions. So that is the fifth category. The sixth category is Antaryami. So the Antaryami is different from the Atman. The Atman is the one who is dwelling, but Antaryami is the conscience keeper. He is the witness. He is the observer. Sometimes there is a little voice that keeps telling you, you shouldn't have done this. This is wrong, not this, but you still go ahead and do it. In that sense, he remains aloof. He's observing, but he's actually not, acting on it, but he's telling you, he's showing you the mirror saying what you're doing is actually wrong. You shouldn't have been doing this. You shouldn't be doing this, but you still go ahead and do it. So he's the Antaryami, the Sakshi, the witness. So some names would look at him as Antaryami, the eternal witness. The seventh category is the Dina Vatsala, that he's so benevolent. Parashara Bhattar, in fact, several of his namas would come under this category. Shankara also, gives some namas that fall under the category of Dina Vatsala. That is, he's so compassionate. You can see him as your friend. You can see him as your father, your mother, your sister, whatever relationship you want with him, it is possible. So he's a Dina Vatsala. So these 7 categories, I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, sir.
I don't know if you've spoken for too long. Okay.
No, sir, it's fine. Yeah. We're actually waiting for this session eagerly. So I'll be taking a few more questions. I hope you are not, not short of time, basically, sir.
Right. No, we'll be fine.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The thing is that, these chants, they are recommended to be, the Vedic chants, basically, they have a swara associated with it.
Mm.
So how important is to chant the Vishnu Sahasranam in a proper swara, or is it, is it just about devotion that we can chant without initiation or without, without looking at the appropriate or swara or pronunciation? So what is your take on that, sir?
I think pronunciation is crucial because the meanings can change. There are several videos that are available, and I would suggest the best one is what MS Subbalakshmi's rendition is probably the best, because that is what my guru told me, uh, in Bangalore, who initiated me into Vedic Vedas and all of that. He told me that one of the best renditions, not one of the best, the best rendition is that of MS Subbalakshmi, because she spent so much time perfecting each nama, working on each of these namas, and it's only then that she agreed to even start the chanting. So that's a good thing to refer to. And you get several of these books. There are two, three ways in which people do it. Some people simply chant it, but there is also some who will do it at a much deeper level, which is the at the meditative level, where they will have a proper sankalpa and do a lot of nyasa and all of those things, so that you have karanyasa, then all of these shuddhi that happens, and then the chanting. So there are two ways to do it. You could start with the general chant and then just listen to it, and then because it takes about 25 minutes. In fact, there is a recent scientific study that did a small study. I think it's also published in a journal, where I think there was a cohort of, whether it was a cohort or whether it's only one or two people, but essentially what it was, that is that this group or this person was asked to chant the Vishnu Sahasranama for about 1 month or 2 months on a regular basis at a particular time, and his health parameters before and after were measured. This included his stress levels, his BP, his on all of these things. They found significant improvements across health parameters. Now, if you look at the Falashruti of Vishnu Sahasranama, it specifically says that you will get, Arogya is one of the things that it definitely promises, that if you chant this, Arogya is something that you will have. Now, there is also a study that proves it. How this happens, that is, it's an experiential thing. People have to experience it to get it. But if you ask me, if I have to say from, speak from personal experience, I think it's probably one of the easiest and the most beneficial of shlokas. There is a reason why, Sahasranama and Vishnu Sahasranama, that you don't, if you say Sahasranama, people will immediately make the connect to Vishnu Sahasranama. There's no other Sahasranama that's as famous. There is a reason behind that. And obviously the reason is because of the supreme benefit that it confers on those who chant it.
Right, sir.
And there's another,
yes,
sorry, go ahead.
No, continue, sir, please.
No, there is another angle to it. One is that, in the Mahabharata, in the ocean of the Mahabharata, they say that there are 3 jewels or 3 gems that are there in the ocean of the Mahabharata. Interestingly, obviously, everybody knows that the greatest of the gems is the Bhagavad Gita. The second is, Vidura, Dhritarashtra asks Vidura to, Dhritarashtra goes through a phase when he's very depressed. He doesn't know what he's doing, what is right, what is wrong, why is he behaving in a particular fashion. Then Vidura starts to work with him in terms of explaining to him what is dharma, what is all of these things. But Vidura realizes that, the relationship between Dhritarashtra and Vidura is such that they're essentially brothers, and Dhritarashtra is not really making the connect, or rather it's not possible for Vidura. We also know it. If we for example, it's very difficult for us to teach our own children or teach our own family members about these things. But if somebody else tells it, it's okay. So in that sense, Vidura decides to call the sage Sanat Sujata, and therefore that is the Sanat Sujatitya or the Sanat Sujata. Sanat Sujata, that is there in the Mahabharata. That's a second gem that they say is where it talks of the importance of multiple things. It talks about divinity, it talks about all of these things. So the Sanat Sujatitya. And the third is the Vishnu Sahasranama. That is the third gem. Shankara has written a commentary on all 3. You can find a commentary, and Shankara's commentary in Bhagavad Gita, everybody knows. But Shankara has also written a very elaborate commentary on the Sanat Sujata because he felt it was very, very important for people to read it. So it's called the Sanat Sujatitya by some people. And then the Vishnu Sahasranam, obviously, so yeah. So that itself should tell us the importance of it. And why are so many people writing a commentary on the Vishnu Sahasranam? I mean, it's not one or two. Every single, be it Madhva, be it Parashara Bhattar, be it from the angle of the Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, Advaita, be it from every single angle, you have people who have written on it. And, there are Pandit Satyadev Vashishta has written an elaborate commentary that is completely different from any of the commentaries that are extant. For example, be it Shankara's commentary, be it Parashara Bhattar, because if you read Pandit Satyadev Vashishta, he uses only the Vedas to start describing each of these namas. He doesn't use any of these interpretations that either Shankara or Parashara Bhattar uses. Then you have Sri Radhakrishna Shastri who has done it. Then you have Narasimhan Krishnamachari's commentary. Several commentaries. People don't write just. There's a reason why it's written, and there's a reason why this is done. So that's the importance of the Vishnu Sahasranam. And I think it's by itself it is a great meditative practice.
Right, sir.
Yeah.
So just coming to my final question, and then we'll take question from the people in attendance. What is the connection between Vishnu Sahasranama and food? Basically, what happens, sir, is it is said that in Jyotish, if you look at it from a Jyotish perspective, Vishnu is related to the planet Mercury, and Mercury is the is the highest form of ahimsa or non-violence. So people say that if you are giving Vishnu Sahasranama as a remedy, and by the way, Parashara in the Brahat Parashara Hora Shastra, he recommends the chanting of Vishnu Sahasranama as a remedy for for all the evils in the horoscope. Okay, so the thing is, the point being Mercury being representative of the highest form of non-violence, that is ahimsa. So if you are consuming non-veg, and by non-veg I also mean onion and garlic here. So if you're consuming non-veg and then you are chanting Vishnu Sahasranama, it goes against the very ethics of Mercury. Right. And but the point is, most of the people in India, of course, most of the people in the south are vegetarians. Similarly,
not really.
Okay, in my perception, okay, fair enough. And then
not really.
Yeah, but if you look at the people in the northern parts of India where the Char Dhams are located, so they are vegetarians. But if you look at a place like Kashmir or the Kashmiri Pandits, or even a place like the Northeast, for example,
or even West Bengal for the matter.
Yeah. So for example, I am a Shakta by tradition. I have a Diksha in Kali. So the point is, we are all non-vegetarian people. So where do we fit in, or can we chant the Vishnu Sahasranama? And if we do chant it, then will it give the same benefits, or or do you recommend there is a do you see that there is a definite link between the Vishnu Sahasranama and the dietary consumptions that we have, or the dietary preferences that we have as people?
Okay, there are two caveats. One, I do not know Jyotisha. You're the expert, so I don't know any. I'm absolutely. I'm not even a novice. I know nothing of Jyotisha. So I will not go down that route and tell and say that. With regard to veg and non-veg, I have. I don't even. I typically don't. I mean, each the Shakta tradition. Bali is something that is an important part of the tradition itself, right? If I understand it right, I mean, so
Right, sir.
So you can't. So if you ask me, no, I'm a complete vegetarian. But would I, as a dharmic Hindu, advocate against Pashu Bali? No, I would say, if the tradition demands Pashu Bali, you have to give it. Very interesting. I will mention this because if you go to the website of the Kanchi Kamakoti Peetam, they specifically mention about the Pashu Bali. And there they mention that Pashu Bali, if it is done for the sake of this particular whatever reasons, for reasons that are closely connected to the yagna or any of those things, it is completely acceptable. It's completely acceptable. So in that sense, I won't. I don't think I can say anything about whether we should specifically with regard to whether it impacts or not. I won't be the person to be able to answer that because I don't know. I've never had non-vegetarian food and also chanted the Vishnu Sahasranama. I have to speak only from experience. But there is one change that has definitely happened in me, which I can add here, which I can share with people, and that is the amount of food that I consume has come down dramatically, which means that I don't know. I definitely feel it is connected to the chanting of the Vishnu Sahasranama, because I think it definitely has a salutary effect on your digestion. The Agni Tattva is supremely improved, because Agni is what burns food, and therefore I've definitely seen an increase in the Agni Tattva in myself. And I will not speak for others. I will speak only from my own personal experience. There's been a tremendous increase in that. Digestion has improved tremendously, but at the same time, issues connected for the last almost a year and a half. I have not had a single issue connected with anything to do with food or so on. It has also been that I've been very, very careful about the food that I consume. For about a year, I never ate anything outside. That could also be the reason. But I'm saying definitely there is. I can speak from personal experience that there is a definite and tremendous increase in the ability to digest, and also my the requirement for consumption, the amount of food that I consume has come down. That is something that I can say.
All right, sir. All right. I'll just read out one question. It is from a Jyotish perspective, and I am opening up the forum for your questions. So if anyone has something to ask, sir, please type it in the comments section so that I can forward it to him. So Prashant ji has asked, is Vishnu Sahasranam related to padas in the nakshatras? If yes, how and why? So the thing is, each nakshatra has 4 padas. Okay, this is purely from a Jyotish perspective. Each nakshatra has 4 padas, and each verse of the Vishnu Sahasranam is related to one pada of that particular nakshatra. So we have 27 nakshatras multiplied by 4, it gives us 108, and that is the exact number of verses in the Vishnu Sahasranam. So why Parashara recommends it in the BPHS is that he says that if you chant the Vishnu Sahasranam, you don't have to do any other remedy, because all the nakshatra padas are being taken care of. So that is the significance of the Vishnu Sahasranam in improving the nakshatra padas.
Yeah, interesting. I think even Charaka Samhita recommends the Vishnu Sahasranam very interestingly.
Right, sir. And what I've seen is there was a client which I had. He was suffering from a lot of problems, and one of the things that he would have is that during the month of Kartik, the Hindu month of Kartik, all of a sudden he would get fever. He would get fever and boils over his body, and the problem was actually
Right.
coming from Mangala. Okay, and the point is, once Vishnu Sahasranam was recommended, the fever, it came down dramatically in only 1 month's time. It was only a month when he started chanting, and the month before Kartik Masa, and the fever came down drastically, and even there was a huge improvement in the condition of boils. Of course, it was not completely healed, but it was there. The improvement was there. Okay, so one more question is coming here. Does it need anyone to be initiated in order to chant the Vishnu Sahasranam? Do you see that as a factor coming in? Because
I was not initiated into it in the sense that nobody, I don't think the Lalita Sahasranama definitely needs initiation. I don't think the Vishnu Sahasranama requires that, as far as I understand it. Lalita Sahasranama, I would definitely advise not starting chanting without any initiation. But Vishnu Sahasranama is, if you have the requisite bhakti and the Sharanagati to Vishnu, I think it can be started. How do you start? I think the question also asks, how do we start? How does somebody start? I would suggest start by listening to it. You have many of these. You can listen to it on Spotify, MS Subbalakshmi, or just play it and sit down with your eyes closed. It takes about 23 minutes. Vishnu, MS's rendition is about 23 minutes. I have timed mine. I do it in 3 different sets, 3 different ways in which, if I don't have too much time, I can typically do it in 16 minutes. I have timed myself. I can also do it exactly in 23 minutes like MS does. But when there is enough time and I'm really in a meditative, contemplative mood, I can also, chant it over about 45 minutes. So all 3 possibilities I have, I have seen with regard to the Vishnu Sahasranam, it's possible. So if you have very short time, I've done it. I'm able to do it in 16 minutes. But that requires that you are very familiar with the verses and with the namas and shlokas as well. But I would suggest that that anybody who wants to do it can buy a book which is available. The Ramakrishna Mutt, publishes many of these books. It's also available for free online. And yeah, just start by listening to it. Close your eyes and just listen to it. 23 minutes is what it takes. So it could be a very contemplative, meditative kind of exercise that you want to do.
All right. So, and there is one question. Suppose someone has been advised to chant the Vishnu Sahasranam every day as a remedy. So is it okay if some days are skipped? Because sometimes it happens that you are out of station or you're traveling in a way. Suppose you are in the train, because I have seen people chanting Vishnu Sahasranama in the flight as well. So I've seen that happen. So it depends upon your devotion, isn't it, sir? On how devoted or how committed you are to the chant.
If somebody has asked you to do it daily, I don't see why you will have an excuse to not do it daily. I think many of these, when somebody has given you an injunction and says it has to be chanted daily, I would think that the effects happen only when you do it daily. If you skip a day, what do you want to do? I'm asking why would you? I still can't figure out why people can't find 23 minutes or 20 minutes to chant it.
You're right.
I'm not able to relate to that. So
okay, sir. And the other thing is that one question is there: what is the best time to chant the Sahasranam, or is it better to chant in the morning or in the evening, or any?
I prefer the morning because I'm a morning person.
Okay.
So I really don't know what is the best time and other things. I'm a very early morning person. I'm typically up by about 3:30 in the morning. So I prefer the morning. And even my writing happens typically in the morning. So when I sit down with it.
Right. Sir. Okay. This is a long question coming in. So the questioner is curious to know about your experience when you meditate on those namas that have very divergent interpretations by Shankaracharya and Parasharapattar. Do you think longer? And try to adopt to one? So the questioner, he wants to know a neutral perspective regarding both the versions.
Okay, so at a very fundamental level, Shankara approaches it from his Advaitic standpoint. But at the same time, often it's the error that many people make is that Shankara only proposed the abstract. If Shankara only believed in that, then he wouldn't have written so many commentaries. He wouldn't have written so many shlokas and other things. So, in that sense, Shankara is absolutely open to the Sattva Guna, Sarva Guna Sampanna Rupa of Narayana, or for that matter, any deity as well. Now, the differences obviously come from the two standpoints that I've mentioned this also. It comes from the standpoints that Parashara and as well as Shankara take. So there are several namas. In fact, a lot of the namas, they are almost similar in how they see it, in how they interpret it. But there are obviously some namas that are divergent. They diverge in how they see it. But how do I see it? I read both interpretations just once, and then I forget about it, because I see my whole philosophy is like this. I always sit down with the question: if Shankara said this, if Ramanuja said this, if somebody else said that, how does it matter to you? So it should matter to you at a very fundamental, at a very deep level. So if I read it once, I'll read the nama, I'll look at what Shankara has said, I'll look at what Parashara said, but it will only inform me and not influence my thinking on that nama. So I'll have to sit down with the nama. Sometimes some of the days I've not been able to write is because I've simply had no no revelation at all of how I should approach this nama. Then I don't write. I write only when it comes to me. For example, today's nama, for example, when I wrote Nakshatri or Nakshatra Nemihi, or for that matter, any of these namas, sometimes you get it for sometimes, in several namas, I've gone to Aurobindo's take on it. Not on the nama itself, but what Aurobindo has said on some aspect of it, which I felt is important, and I would use that as something. Or sometimes, I've used my own things, but essentially it's not something that I force myself to write. So if I have not written on a day or something, it's simply because nothing has come to me. It has to come to me. I don't force myself. It's not putting pen to paper, but rather it has to come to me. And then only when it has come to me shall I put pen to paper. That's the approach I've taken. So it has to mean something to me. So in the meditate, that's essentially how the, when they said the seer rishis, they saw what the mantra meant. So it has to mean something to you as well, is how I see it. People can disagree, but that's how I see it. So it has to mean something to me.
Right. So right.
Right.
So there are certain people, they say that you should chant only the 108 verses in the Sahasranama, in the Vishnu Sahasranama, that is. And then ideally, in my opinion, one should start from the beginning and end with the Falashruti. Or
Right.
is it the way that you recommend too, sir? Or is it that one can chant only the 108 verses available?
Okay, so I typically like to chant the whole thing, where we start with Shuklam Bharadram Vishnu and then end with the Falashruti and all of that. But I can give you two experiences, two things that, I still remember when I first, many years ago, I bought a small booklet which had the Vishnu Sahasranama. I didn't know much about it. This was, when I was still in my college days, I suppose. And how you look at how early things start and when you actually do it. So 20-25 years later is when I've actually started to write on it. I remember I don't remember his name now, but the president of the Vivekananda Ashram, it used to be called the Vivekananda Ashram at that time. Now it is called the Ramakrishna Ashram in Alsur in Bangalore, who said, this particular booklet did not have the Falashruti, nor did it have the, the beginning, the verses, the preliminary sankalpa and all of those things. So, or the nyasa, or all of those things were missing. So I asked him, he said, no, this is where it starts from. So this is the Vishnu Sahasranama, it starts from here. So did I take his advice? I actually did not take his advice. I went and bought another book which had the full, this one, because it's a personal preference. I like to, do it from the beginning to end. But there is also a very interesting shloka in the Falashruti. Parvati asks Shiva, can you give me a lagu for those who are very busy? I mean, she's the mother, right? She's always compassionate. She wants to give her children an easy way out. She says, for those who are very busy, those who don't have the time to chant the entire Vishnu Sahasranama, what do you suggest? This is the most beautiful moments in the Vishnu Sahasranama. How much time would it take for Shiva to say, just chant my name? Isn't Shiva, isn't Hara also Hari? Isn't Hari also Hara? What is the difference between Shankara and Narayana? Aren't Shankara and Narayana the same? But he says, Shri Rama Rama Rameti, Rame Rame Manorame, Sahasranama Tattulyam, Rama Nama Varanane, he says. If such a person is there who cannot chant it, he says, just the name of Rama, that Sri Rama is alone, because the entire Sahasranama Tattulyam Rama Nama Varanane, the entire essence of the Sahasranama is compacted within the name of Rama, is what he says. But is that a solution to this? So why chant the Sahasranama? Let's just sit with the Rama Nama Japa. No, that is if you don't have any other option. When you don't have any other option, that is when you do it. But at every opportunity, I think the entire Nama, Sahasranama can be chanted. I don't see it as a challenge. I don't see how people can't take 20 minutes out when they have so much time to, go browse through their mobiles or their social media profiles and all of that. I think even if it sounds a little harsh, I think it's just an excuse.
Right.
Yeah. And these booklets are small. You can carry it. You can even read it on your mobile if you want to travel in it. Yeah.
Yes, so for a beginner, suppose who is beginning with the Vishnu Sahasranam, what is the approach that you recommend taking? Of course, you have told us that you should be first listening.
Yeah, that's the approach I would take, because though that is not the approach that I took, but in retrospect, I think that is a better approach. Maybe you want to sit down and listen to the Sahasranama, because I think just listening to the Nama itself is therapeutic in that sense. It goes deep within, and there is a general feeling of there's at least from my own experience, there's a great feeling of well-being, of a deep connect that within. So I would say start with listening, and then start with, don't try to chant the entire Nama Sahasranama. Start with a few things. Start with the from the beginning to, let's say, the entire the Sankalpa, and then the first few verses. Then slowly add one verse every day over time. And in 108 days, you would have gone through the entire one. And just add one verse every day. You have 108. Therefore, you can add one, and then slowly over, and then every day start adding one Falashruti yourself to it. And by in a matter of say 4 or 5 months, you will be chanting the whole thing.
All right, sir. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have any more questions from the participants coming in. Anyways, thank you so much, sir. You took your
No, not at all.
busy schedule, and I hope everyone learned.
I think Sushena is saying something. Sushena is a personal friend, so thank you. He's mentioning in this chat.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining, and then thank you, sir, for your time. We will like
No,
to.
not at all. Absolute pleasure, Dev. Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
we will have you back again on this channel, and I'll upload the recordings on my channel, and I'll send you a personal copy as well, which will be private
Right.
in nature. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
Om Guru Namaste.